Welcome to the show. I'm Mark Crutcher, president of Life Dynamics, and as usual, I'm joined by my lovely assistant, Renee Hobbs. Hello, Renee. How are you?
I'm good.
And we've got a special guest host this week, Jacqueline Harvey. You are a professor at Tarleton State University, is that correct?
That's true.
And you do a lot of research on abortion and other life-related issues, and you'll be talking a little bit about some stuff here. So anyway, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
As we know, last show we did a whole show on nothing but the birth control issue, so we didn't get to a lot of the news that was out there. And so we've got a ton of stuff to talk about.
Yes.
And of course, a lot of it's the standard stuff that we always talk about. More abortion clinics closing. One of the neatest ones, South Bend, Indiana, abortion clinic's been there for 30 years, is closing. And this is where George Klopfer is. And he's been in the news a lot lately.
A ton, yeah.
He's bad dude. Oh, they're all bad dudes. Planned Parenthood has closed 2 more abortion clinics in Pennsylvania, and that's 6 Planned Parenthood clinics since 2013, and 12 total abortion clinics, not just Planned Parenthood in the state. So
Right, that's good.
Yeah.
Victory for us.
Leroy Carhart has sent 4 women to the hospital in the last 4 months with botched abortions. And the other day he sent 2, like in a few days. And, my wife, Tulane, came to me and said, I wonder how many women he's going to have to butcher before somebody's going to do something about this guy.
Right.
But
Yeah, they allow it to continue to happen. These women are dropping off, and it's an average every 4 months that something happens to a woman. So
at his place.
At his place.
No, that doesn't count all the others.
What is his current death toll?
We don't. When you start asking about how many women an abortionist has killed, it's almost impossible to know because they're so good at covering it up. And we know, like when I wrote Line 5 many years ago, we found the ways that they covered up and how they even worked through the CDC to cover them up. We found, for example, the CDC in 2 particular years, I don't remember what it was, but in these 2 particular years, they only listed 2 women nationwide having died from botched abortions. With our little meager resources right here, we found 16 that we could confirm during that same period of time. So you really never know how many of these women these people butcher and how many they
He
kill.
admitted on video on a live-action sting to losing 1 woman, and this was a couple years ago, and her name escapes me at the time. But it was a late-term abortion. She was a newlywed, relatively young. Do you
She was a
remember her name?
teacher.
Teacher, yes.
I'm
I
blank.
can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember her name. But he was talking about the risk and complications. He's like, well, that patient, she died. I want to let you know she died. So he does admit to at least 1 we know of, and that was recent. And nothing came of it.
Right, nothing.
There's no
he killed her.
discipline or anything that I'm
As
aware
a
of.
matter of fact, the family was rooting for him too, for the pro-choice side, unfortunately.
It's unbelievable. We've had clients here that had a child or a wife or a sister or somebody die, and they remain pro-aborts. It's unbelievable sometimes. We're also seeing a growing trend on college campuses around the country of complete intolerance by the side that claims to be so tolerant. And pro-lifers will put up a display. These people will tear it down. We recently had this at the University of California, Davis. The Students for Life group there set up an event. They were attacked.
It happens every time.
Every time.
And that's what you said a couple of weeks ago, that somebody needs to stake out and stay there and videotape or keep an eye on it.
Well, in this particular case, they had videotape.
Yeah, and the cops didn't do anything.
Cops didn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Well, keep in mind the administration is probably the biggest obstacle we have to even get a display. So, of course, when the students protest this display on the other side, there's not going to be any consequences because that's what the administration
Well, protesting is fine.
you know?
They have
not
a right to
protesting,
protest.
Vandalizing, harassing.
But attacking people and...
Right. And another thing about that is that they had a sanctuary place for the pro-choice people that were offended by what they saw. And the pro-lifers, do we ever get that?
No, it's unbelievable. All right, we're seeing, but anyway, this is a standard thing we see every month. It's like we talked about before that when we moved to this new format of at Life Talk, we recognized that a lot of our news coverage every month was the same thing. More women dying, more abortion clinics shutting down, which is good news.
Yeah.
And more of this kind of activity.
Right.
And more men killing women because they won't have abortions.
And sexual abuse.
And the sexual abuse of children and of patients. And we've got a big thing coming out on that.
Yeah, I'd love to plot that on a graph and see what the trend is. If it appears to me that it's going up, and I know that things are underreported as is, so we can't really know what it is. But there is not the National Abortion Federation, but the Feminist Majority Foundation keeps a website specifically of every little thing that they perceive pro-lifers are doing that may be hostile. And so they can say incidences are going, they can give statistics about how harassment's going up if they get a hang-up phone call, which could have been a wrong number for all they know. So, it'd be interesting if we could start plotting this when we get this data, just go into a spreadsheet, start writing it down, and see if there are any trends nationwide, because it seems to me like college campuses are getting even more hostile than when I was a student myself. It was more hostile in graduate school for me than it was when I was in college itself. And then students come to me all the time and say, why can't we have the same free speech rights that the other students have?
But I've been saying this for years, for 25 years. I wrote about this back in the 1980s. The closer we get to victory, the more vicious the other side is going to become. I said that back when we were a long way from victory. Now that we're getting closer, you can see
it.
You can see it happening. They're going to get more vicious. Because one thing we have to understand is these people have a mental mindset by being supporters of legalized abortion that you solve your problems through violence and death. That's their mindset. And so you're seeing this on college campuses. You're seeing it on places that aren't college campuses where they're becoming more and more vicious. You're seeing a lot of stuff in the media today about this guy that Obama has appointed to be a Supreme Court Justice, Merrick Garland. And everybody's saying, oh, he's a moderate, and the Republicans ought to be happy to get this kind of guy. Of course, they think anybody that's to the right of Che Guevara or Castro is okay. Anybody that's to the right of them is a moderate. And they're saying, we don't know what this guy's position on abortion is. That's nonsense. That's pure nonsense.
Yes, it is.
Right.
Read the articles.
Read the articles. He recently told a New York Times reporter that one of his inspirations was Justice Harry Blackmun. And Blackmun, of course, wrote the Roe versus Wade decision. Is one of the most morally bankrupt people I've ever. I've said at the time, and I'll say it again. Adolf Hitler wasn't more morally bankrupt than Harry Blackmun.
Yeah, 58 million children are
died
gone
because of him.
Yes.
Anyway, he described Blackmun's papers as, quote, a great gift to the country, unquote. And he also was the lower court judge who ruled against Priests for Life in their suit that's now at the Supreme Court. He ruled against Priests for Life in that suit.
Yeah, he's bad news.
But the main thing is, what you have to understand is, the moment this man was nominated, we knew he was a radical pro-abort because Obama wouldn't have nominated if he weren't.
That's right.
I guarantee he sat in a room with Obama, and Obama said, I want to know your views on Roe versus Wade.
Right.
And if they're not right, you're
out.
You're not going.
And not just abortion, the HHS mandate.
Right.
I'm pretty sure that, are you going to uphold my legacy with the HHS mandate? Or are you going to continue to litigate against the little sisters of the poor?
Right. The little sisters
Little sisters, if you are suing nuns, you are doing something wrong.
You're suing nuns to force them to distribute birth control.
Yeah.
And they
don't
won't
wanna
be
go-
able to serve the elderly and the most vulnerable among us, next to, of course, unborn children, because you're going to force them to pay for birth control.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling where our country's gotten to. Anyway, and one of the reasons for that is, I will contend, and I've said for years, that one of the reasons the country's in a state of moral collapse is because the church has already collapsed. The church is now an irrelevant institution in American culture. And now you're seeing it even among people who call themselves Christians. We've talked before about Barna, who's a research company that only research people who claim to be Christians, and they have a standard that they use for that, and I think it's they must attend church twice a month or more in order to be included in any kind of Barna research. A new study by Barna is showing that even Christians think if you hold Christian beliefs, you're an extremist. You're outside mainstream belief. For example, 64% of the people that Barna researches claim it is extreme to, quote, demonstrate outside an organization you consider to be immoral. They consider that to make you an extremist.
I wonder what that is code for. I wonder what they were getting at.
I don't know. I wonder. 51% say that it is extreme to protest government policies that conflict with their religion. That means all the founding fathers of this country, they would have considered extremist because that's what they were doing.
Right.
52% think that it is extreme to, quote, believe that sexual relationships between people of the same sex are morally wrong, unquote. It's one thing to say, I approve of gay marriage or whatever you want to approve of. That's fine. But to say that it is an extreme position to claim that you think it's wrong to believe in what the Bible says about relationships between same-sex people, that makes you an extremist. Two of them that really bothered me. According to this study, and these are Christians, according to the study, if you, quote, attempt to convert others to your faith, unquote, 60% of Americans now believe that makes you an extremist. What is the basic commandment to all Christianity?
That we're supposed to spread the gospel.
Supposed to spread the gospel and
Right.
try to convert people,
Right.
right? That is the fundamental
Right.
tenet of our faith.
Right.
Christians say, 60% of them, that if you attempt to do that, you're an extremist.
Well, let's take a step back and just look at logic. If you have something like CrossFit, anything that you think changed your life, that made your life so much better, that gives your
Yeah.
life meaning, not just talking about eternal life and things of, eternal significance, you are going to evangelize that to your friends.
That's right.
I tried this, I tried that. Jesus is an example. Jesus changed my life. Jesus saved me. It's
Right.
just logic that if you deeply hold your convictions, you're going to share them.
Yeah.
Whether you're Christian or Baha'i or anything.
Whatever. And if you truly believe, if you're a Christian and you truly believe in the gospel, why would you not want other people to partake in what you, are you just
But
going to be so
are-
selfish that you,
Are
it's only for you?
vegetarians extremists? Are people who are huge advocates of the paleo diet and how it made their hair, body imbalance, whatever it is, are they extremists? When people, evangelize, don't even say evangelize, advocate for something they really care about, does that make you extreme by definition? Or is it just Christians when Christians do that?
42% said that you're an extremist, quote, if you quit a good-paying job to pursue mission work in another country, you're an extremist,
Right.
right?
Yeah. This is pretty tough to hear.
It is.
It goes against everything that.
Listen to
I grew
this.
up
This is the one that I thought was incredible. 25%. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, 25% of them, of the people they surveyed, say that if your teenage daughter, unmarried teenage daughter, commits to abstain from sex until marriage, she's an extremist.
Extremist, yeah. Yep.
And that they also said 3/4 of Americans believe that being religiously extreme is a threat to our society.
I'm an extremist.
I'm a
I don't
threat
know
to
about
our
you.
society,
Yes.
Renee. I am
Yeah,
a
you
threat
two
to
are
our
dangerous.
society.
It's unbelievable where we've come
We are
to.
blonde threats to our society.
Yes.
I want to talk about for a minute. We talked about the Supreme Court a minute ago. I want to talk about hypocrisy. One of your favorite people,
Yes.
Wendy Davis.
I know. I love her.
And she's talking about the Republicans failing to. I don't think you're on Wendy Davis's Christmas card list.
I don't
Renee.
think I am.
Right.
Yeah.
I testified against the lawsuit that was brought after HB2 SB5 passed in spite of the filibuster. I was one of Greg Abbott's expert witnesses in defense of it. And it was a lot of fun because she was just reading for the sake of filibuster anything anyone
Right.
gave her, no matter how absurd it was.
Right. Now-
so I was able to go just piece by piece and go through and explain it didn't make any sense.
But the point is, she is calling out the Republicans for failing to vote on Merrick Garland's nomination to the Supreme Court.
Right.
She says the Republicans are being obstructionists for failing to hold a hearing. But wait a minute. This woman made her reputation
As
on
being.
filibustering a bill so that it didn't go to the legislature because she knew that it was going to pass.
Yes.
Right? And we
Right.
know that's true because it eventually
Right.
did.
And what is that called? An obstructionist.
Right. When you say, so she's going to say, I can filibuster this bill so that it doesn't get a vote. But you can't not vote on this Supreme Court nominee. It's
Right.
I mean, you can't have it both ways. It's political procedure, and it's legitimate. A filibuster is a legitimate political procedure. She used it to her advantage, but so is refusing to hear on a Supreme Court nominee when there may be a different administration and
Well,
a different
one of the
nominee.
things I heard on the news the other night. They were saying, some Democrat was saying, look, the Republicans need to just get over it. The elections have consequences, right? Okay, they do. So the consequence of the election of Barack Obama, among many other ills, was he got to appoint this guy. But all of these senators were elected too. So their elections have consequences. Don't they get the benefit of their consequences, which is they don't have to vote on the guy, they don't have to give him a hearing?
That's right.
That's their role.
Right.
And so those elections have consequences.
Can we turn Robert Bork into a verb?
Yeah.
Is this being borked, or is there some borking going around?
Right. Yeah, there is. Yeah, they started this with Robert Bork, obviously. Oklahoma is proposing a legislation that would require Oklahoma public schools to teach that life begins at conception. Of course, this is a medically proven, every medical textbook in the world says life begins at conception, right? And of course, the rabid pro-aborts in the legislature up there are going berserk. And you talk about hypocrisy. These people have no shame. They have no shame. I'm convinced of that. The Democrats are saying, they're questioning, listen to this, whether it's appropriate to confront students in grades 9 through 12 with such politically divisive issue. But they will go to the mat. They'll go to the Supreme Court to defend the right of these girls in grades 9 through 12, and even earlier than 9,
Right.
to have an abortion.
Right.
Right?
Right.
But they can't know potentially what it is
What they're doing.
because that would be
Yeah.
disturbing and shaming.
Let's
and
keep 'em in
no
the dark.
ultrasounds,
Right.
no informed consent whatsoever.
Or they send Planned Parenthood into their schools to teach them anal sex and oral sex and you name it. They teach them
Right.
things that the kids should not hear.
The stuff that we're seeing people being sent to us, that their kids are being shown, and the pictures, and you read some of the books that Planned Parenthood is endorsing
Oh,
and
they're
putting up.
nasty.
It's pornography.
Yes.
And I've said this before. If I took some of these books, let's just use one of them. One of the more mundane ones, for example, is Perfectly Normal, a book that Planned Parenthood endorses, and uses in their sex ed. If I took that book and I went out on the sidewalk in front of this building, and a couple of little 12-year-old girls were walking by, and I said, "Hey, come look at this."
Right.
In about 10 minutes, I'm going to be sitting in the back seat of a Denton police car.
That's right.
And I
hope
should
so.
be.
And you should be.
And I
That's
should be.
right.
That's right. But if I was a middle school teacher, or even a grade school teacher, they're now talking about K through 12 for their sex education, value-neutral, contraception-based sex ed.
Right.
If I'm a teacher and I show those same two little 12-year-old girls, say, "Hey, look, come here, look at this," in the
Right.
classroom, now it's
It's
education.
okay. Right.
Right.
It's not pornography because those were cartoons.
Yeah, no, cartoon
Oh,
figures.
really?
Yeah, all the drawings
That's
were
the difference.
cartoons, and therefore it makes it okay.
Representative Emily Virgin of Norman, Oklahoma, who opposes the bill, said parents would prefer to have personal conversations about sex and pregnancy with their children rather than defer that to public school teachers.
Sure.
Is that the argument she makes when they're wanting to put Planned Parenthood's value-neutral, contraception-based sex ed in schools? If somebody come up and said, "Wait a minute, Miss Virgin, parents don't want you telling your kids this sort of thing." "Oh, well, no, we've got to be more progressive, and the parents aren't talking to kids about sex, so we have to." That's their standard argument. But now, all of a sudden, when the state of Oklahoma is wanting to put just medically proven information
Right.
in front of these kids that they don't like, all of a
Right.
sudden, the parents
they
have to
blow
be
up, right.
right.
Well, it was Alan Gutmacher that right after the Roe v. Wade decision went down was asked, now that we have abortion as the law of the land, what do we have to make sure that abortion always stays legal? And his response was 2 words: sex education.
yeah.
Right.
And you can't teach kids biology without a certain degree of sex education. It's just
Right.
not birds and bees necessarily, it's just biology.
Right.
And, sex causes babies. And they have looked at, there's been studies of abstinence only, abstinence plus, everything else. If you just remind kids, with shows like Teen Mom, if you just remind kids, sex causes babies, you are running the risk of pregnancy. And pregnancy has these long-term consequences. After you're pregnant, there are really no good options when you're a teenager. There are some worse than others, but there are no good options. Just by reminding kids of basic natural law and biology, we have having them delay sex has actually been shown to have a marked decrease in the teen pregnancy rate.
Sure. Well, sure it does. But the value-neutral, contraception-based sex education is specifically designed to get these kids sexually active.
Right. It's to give them lull them into a false sense of security by having them buy Planned Parenthood's products.
Right.
And that's when we have teen pregnancy rates go through the roof.
Right.
Right.
I often wonder, we've talked here a lot about what happened to the concept of choice. Every time something flies in the face of abortion, they try to force it. Alliance Defending Freedom attorneys now are representing the Catholic Medical Association against the ACLU because the pro-aborts are trying to force Catholic hospitals to do abortions, force them to do abortions. Again, what happened to the concept of choice?
Right.
And we spoke earlier about women being injured. OR, Operation Rescue, Troy Newman, at FPA, Women's Health in Abortion Clinic in Bakersfield, California, they recently had to call an ambulance for a girl that they had butchered. And what Troy was able to find out is they called a private ambulance. They didn't call through the 911 system, which is the much quicker way of getting much quicker, getting someone taken care of. They didn't call 911 for this patient that they had butchered, but they called 911 5 times that day on the pro-lifers for things that weren't being done. That video showed the pro-lifers weren't doing any of the things that the pro-abort said they were doing.
They were trying to redirect their mishap on the pro-lifers.
It got so bad that even one of the security guards for the abortion mill called the authorities and said, I think that some of our people are about to accost or assault some of these pro-lifers and may have already done so.
Yeah, and they did.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's follow up, too, on one of the subjects we talked about last month, Renee.
Ooh.
And this is continuing to get a press, except the pro-aborts aren't saying anything about it, of course. The Islamic fighters, ISIS and others, are, and I didn't know this was going on until we covered it on the show a couple of shows back. There are actually rules. I was amazed to find this out. There are rules. If you're going to be an ISIS fighter or an Islamist soldier, and you're going to rape women, which we see them doing now, this is a standard procedure.
Yes.
They kidnap women and rape them.
Right.
They actually have rules for this.
Yes.
They actually have rules that they believe were handed down to them from Muhammad. And one of the things is that you can't rape a woman, you can't take her as your sexual slave if she's pregnant.
Right.
So they're forcing these girls to take birth control, and some of these girls are as young as 9 years old. They're raping these little girls. They're kidnapping them, raping them, and they're saying that ruling in Islamic law, cited by the Islamic State, a man must ensure that the woman he enslaves is free of child before having intercourse with her.
Right.
You know the reason that they do this? Because they don't want there to be question about who the paternity of the baby is. And so if they're selling these women from one person to the next, which they are, they do, they want to make sure that she's not carrying his baby before another man starts having sex with her.
Yeah, and they do break the law. I mean, even when there's a testimony that a girl was pregnant and she was still being raped, so it still happens. But that's why they carry around their birth control everywhere they go, from owner to owner to owner.
Right.
And they won't even ask for they'll pressure into abortion, but because that is against Islamic law, they're not going to do it themselves. They're going to insist that their slave, they throw them over a wall, kick them in the belly, insist that their slave do it. Yeah, because they don't want to tarnish their moral standing.
Their high moral standards. Yeah, we found one here, and that was reported in the New York Times, where the woman, the girl, she was a young girl, made that very point. She said, when I was taken for the abortion, he beat me or threatened me and forced me to tell him that I wanted it. He didn't want it. I wanted it.
Right.
So he's off the hook.
He was ashamed.
Yeah, he was ashamed of it.
He was too ashamed to say that he wanted her to have an abortion. Well, you know what, though? She delivered a healthy baby, so.
Yep, after being thrown over a wall.
And punched in the stomach and everything else, yeah, but she still delivered a healthy
baby. That baby wanted to live.
Yep.
But where are the pro-aborts on this deal? Where are they?
Rooting for them.
Yeah. The fact is, as we talked about on the show, and in this new report that you and I will be coming out with, and the one we've come out with before, shows that this is marginally different than what's going on right here in the United States. Pro-choice men are pro-choice men wherever you find them. And they see abortion as something that protects them, which is why the early feminists in this country were all against legalized abortion.
Right.
They saw it as something that protects sexually irresponsible and sexually predatory males.
We have not gotten, you would think it would be a universal feminist human rights issue that we could get behind. Okay, if it's about choice, then we are in agreement against forced abortions in China. No, because if you question the sacred
abortion,
then that is just a can of worms that they're not willing to open.
Back when we were having the congressional hearings on partial birth abortion, you had two of the most rabid pro-aborts in the world, Barbara Boxer and Dianne Feinstein from California, two I hate to even call them, United States senators from California. The question came up, and I think it was, I can't remember, it may have been Rick Santorum that brought it up, and asked them during the hearings, if a baby comes out alive, what if you're positioning this baby dangling outside the mother's womb, the head's the only thing left in, but let's say the baby slips out, which they say it does. Should that baby now it's separate from the mother, right? Should that baby be given life support? And they said no. And their basic argument was, or we paraphrased their argument as being, when a woman goes into an abortion clinic for an abortion, she's entitled to a dead baby. She comes in there to get a dead baby. She pays for a dead baby. That's what she's entitled to. And that was their argument, basically.
That was Barack Obama's argument.
Yeah, that's what Barack Obama's argument.
It would burden the woman in her original decision to have an abortion, if at the end she doesn't have a dead baby, she has a live child.
Right.
The pro-aborts have to care for that child at all.
The pro-aborts attacked us viciously for making that argument, that we paraphrased what they were saying when we said she's entitled to a dead baby. Now you've got this woman, Diana Green Foster, who's a researcher at the University of California in San Francisco. There's Senate hearings being held on abortion right now. And one of the questions was, should babies that survive abortions be given medical care? They're now a separate entity, right? Even by your standards, they're separate. They're not connected to the mother anymore. And Senator David Vitter from Louisiana said, just to be clear, quote, nobody disagrees that a child born alive should get all medical care for survival. That was a statement he made. Foster said, I do disagree. I can imagine situations where the doctors and nurses have decided there's not a point in medical intervention, and by whisking the baby away to attempt treatment, you've given away a woman's chance to hold her baby and say goodbye.
Yeah, until it dies.
The whole
in her
idea of
arms.
induction termination, the rationale behind it is they're not comfortable with necessarily dismemberment. They're not comfortable with scissors in the back of the head. They're not comfortable with that. And they have this, it's this cognitive salve to protect my baby died a natural death. Well, no, your baby died because your baby was not full term and you expelled your baby from your womb, the environment it needed to survive, early for the sake of not having a child with Down syndrome or some other disability, and because you wanted a perfect child.
Mm-hmm. When you take a child into the emergency room, the doctor doesn't look at you, it's got a problem. The doctor doesn't look at you and say, well, before I'll do anything here, I need to know, is this child wanted? Because wantedness is what determines whether I treat this child or not. Mm-hmm. That's nonsense. Well, we can't apply that standard to the unborn child either. And, these people are just, once you are so morally bereft, once you're so morally bankrupt that you can defend legalized abortion, this is really, if you think about it for a moment, perfectly consistent.
The logical extension of that viewpoint. Mm-hmm. But what really struck me about that article was, once again, it had nothing whatsoever to do with the baby, which is what they were talking about. It was the mother would want to hold the child and say goodbye.
Oh,
You're taking away the ability for the mother who chose to kill her child to have some time to feel better about the
what
situation,
she did, her decision.
And to continue to delude herself into thinking that this was the best possible thing.
Yeah.
Or even a justifiable thing. Whether it's the best possible one or not is beside the point. Is it even justifiable? And, this argument that, well, my child died naturally. Well, if you lock a 3-year-old in a room and don't feed them and don't give them water, they'll die naturally too. That doesn't mean you didn't kill them, that you didn't have an active role in killing them because you denied them the ability to survive. We've got another issue here that I want to bring up. We're over time. I said years ago, and I even wrote it in this latest book of mine, Siege, that had the pro-life movement not existed, we got a lot of warts, but if the pro-life movement had not existed, one of the characteristics of this country would be that there'd be abortion clinics on every college campus. They'd be just like health care centers where you go if you fall and skin your knee and you need some treatment. There'd be abortion clinics, on every campus in this country. Or at least contracts between universities and high schools and a nearby abortion clinic. Mm-hmm. And I've been attacked for saying this, even sometimes by pro-lifers. They don't think it would ever go that far. University of California in Berkeley, the student senate there has passed a bill, Resolution 69, urging the administration to provide free abortions to students through the university healthcare system and to open up an on-campus abortion clinic that these girls can go to.
Those aren't free. Those are paid for with student fees. And half of those students, even at UC Berkeley, statistically around half of those students are not necessarily going to be comfortable with paying for abortions.
Well,
that doesn't
yeah,
matter at all.
but here's what they're saying. The people that are sponsoring this bill are suggesting that the university administration is making too much money and that these abortions can be paid for by taking money away from the university administration.
Yeah.
That's where the money's going to come from.
What
Oh,
logic?
okay.
Yeah.
I just assumed it was the student fees that, my students pay for to go get an antibiotic when they have,
Right.
bronchitis or,
Right.
something like that. But, I think that there's something to justify your theory, and that is look at countries that don't have free speech and therefore don't have a pro-life movement. Abortion is far more rampant.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, anyway, we caught up on some of the news. We had a philosophical thing that we'll hold for another show because I knew we weren't going to get to it with all the news we had to catch up on for the last couple of weeks since we did our show on birth control last week. But anyway, thanks for the good show, Renee, as usual.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you for joining us, helping us out this week. We appreciate your coming.
Thank you.
And unfortunately, that's all the time we have. But until next time, remember, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight. We're here to win because winning is how this killing is going to stop. We'll see you next time.